Lee, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Oh, good. I thought I was alone.
You are not. Hi to those that have just joined us. We are starting in a few minutes, just waiting for everybody to sign in.
So we should have some music, Lee.
Waiting room music.
Elevator music. One minute till Facebook.
Okay, Lee, we're going live on Facebook now. It'll take a minute to connect.
Thank you.
Oh my God. It's... You're not allowed to check your phone. Otherwise, I'm also going to check my phone.
I'm just talking to Adara.
Oh, wow. People are sending in messages. Can you see that?
Thanks, Fiona. Yes, Fiona says, good luck, Paul.
There's something from Michael Chicker and from Fred Abramso. Oh my God. This is the first time anything like this has ever. Oh, wow. All these people. Well, at least there's 10 people.
Okay, we're now live on Facebook.
Thank you.
Amazing.
Okay. Hello and welcome everybody to our very first WHAM webinar. My name is Lee Leidy. For those of you who have never met me, I am the Education Curator at Wits Art Museum. And before we begin today, I just wanted to give a brief update on WHAM and what we've been up to. WHAM is unfortunately not open to the public yet. You would have seen, some of you may have seen that in South Africa, we have been given permissions to open museums in advanced level 3, but we have made the decision to encourage our guests and our WHAMily, as I like to call you all, encourage you to stay home and stay safe, especially as Gauteng reaches a peak period of virus infections. But we will be open again soon. And when we're open again, we'll be opening with this amazing show, Men and Monuments. So we thought it'd be nice to talk a little about it today. For those of you who want to know what we've been up to this whole lockdown period, we have been very busy working in the storerooms and keeping track of our collection and using the time effectively to make sure that our database is up to scratch. There has been some backlog in our storeroom since we are a very busy museum with a small team and no registrar. We have used the time wisely to make sure that the latest accessions are accessioned. We are making sure everything is updated, and we hope that once the database is at its best, then we will look to putting it into an online version for research. So it's a very exciting project we've always wanted to do, and now we finally find the time to concentrate on that. So forgive us for not being very active online, but that's what we've been busy doing. But we really missed all of you. And we wanted to get in touch, and we wanted to keep connected to all the people that we love and know are missing WHAM. So we have decided to try our very first online public event. And it's the first event since lockdown and the first event that WHAM has ever done online. So it's really been new territory for us and a real learning curve to get to this point. An enormous amount of work has gone into making this event today. So the feedback that you give us after this event will be greatly appreciated to see where we should take this. We also realize that although Zoom is a great platform for many and it's been used for many a meeting by now, we wanted to make sure that those that find Zoom difficult to access or struggle with the bandwidth required when downloading the app. So we're also streaming this currently live from Facebook. So hello to our Facebook live community as well. I have to say a special thanks to the big team behind the scenes. Julie Taylor from Guns of Rain is helping us get through this presentation smoothly. And a special thanks to my colleagues, Leslie Cohen, Anna Darodum, for helping with the marketing and strategy around this event. Thank you so much. So that's enough from me. It's now time to hear from our guest speaker today, Paul Emmanuel, who is a South African artist best known for their prints, drawings, and installations. Born in 1969 in Kwabe, Zambia, Emmanuel graduated from the University of Witwatersrand, Johannesburg in 1993. So, yay, fellow Witsi, with a BA in Fine Art. And Emmanuel currently lives and works in Johannesburg. I want to thank you so much for giving your time to so freely for this event. And it's always a real treat to hear from the artists about the actual exhibition and the work. So thank you so much on behalf of WAM and our audiences for being here today.
It's a great pleasure. It's a complete honor to be here.
So can you start maybe by telling us what is this exhibition, Men and Monuments, and why did you want it shown at WAM?
So the exhibition in the space is kind of a retrospective of the remains of what I had put up before on battlefields. I had actually made installations, outdoor installations, and put them up on battlefields and left them to the elements, to the wind and the rain, and in some cases, the harvesters of wheat in the farmlands. And in the center of the space are these kind of, they look like rags and very torn remains of these banners. And the banners comprise these photographs of my body. I've always used my body as the sort of canvas, pressed with these names all over my skin. And those names are, have sourced those names from research done on the battles that took place on the sites. And some of the banners are very, very pristine looking and very, very new looking, like the very sort of pink banners that you see, I think, in Julie, one of the other slides, slide number 2. Those are the banners from the Lost Men Mozambique. And dispersed amongst all of these silk banners are a lot of prints. There are etchings and photographs of the original installations. There are molds of my body, also on the ground on the crates that they were transported in. There is a video artwork upstairs, which is slide number 9, right at the end, Julie. And there are also that's the Lost Men Mozambique. And you can sort of see, well, that's just giving you an idea of the space a bit better. I liked Wits Art Museum as a space because the quality of light is so exquisite. It's almost like a white cube space, and it illuminates the images of my body, even though they're very faded and worn and torn for the Lost Men France. It just illuminates them in such an evocative kind of way. And here you can see a lot of the names pressed into my skin. This was for the Lost Men Mozambique. And I think that it's such a great thing to have them put up at Wits Art Museum, because I think Wits Art Museum is arguably one of the most important one of the most important arts museums in South Africa, public art museums in South Africa. These are a series of drawings, also part of the show, that I've scratched into photographic paper. All scenes of the Lost Men France that went up on the Somme. And I spent 4 years scratching these drawings into the paper, the black photographic paper. So the paper is completely black when it starts. And over a period of months for each drawing, I slowly scrape away the emulsion to create a drawing. I just really enjoy the process of obsessively recapturing something that's happened in the past. I think that was one of my strongest reasons for wanting to work that way. So there's drawings, there's prints, there's photographs, and upstairs in the next slide is a scene from Remember Dismember, which is a video artwork I've made showing that myself enrobing and disrobing in uniforms and business suits that white men have worn throughout history from World War I up until the present day. Also with names pressed into the skin, and from the different battles that South Africa has taken part in from all of those different eras. And that's basically the whole show in a nutshell.
Thanks, that gives a lot of contextualization. But could you speak more to what you're referring to when you say lost men overall, and then maybe more specifically what each installation you're speaking about is in response to?
So when the viewer looks at these images, you just see a banner, a silk banner with a body on it, a white male body, with a whole bunch of names pressed into it. And it's what I did was to do a bit of research into the different sites. I've done 3 installations so far. The first one was the Lost Men Grahamstown, which is what you see here in this image. I did this in 2004, and I researched the Makana Wars from the 1820s to the 50s, around about that time, and found the names of plenty of names of British and Dutch soldiers who fought in the Makana Wars, but and no official lists were kept of the Xhosa dead. And there were a couple of names that were recorded by the British and Dutch soldiers in their diaries and personal writings. And they were recorded, they were in an anglicized kind of way. So they're not, and there's no rank, there's no kind of official title given to any of those men. And I began to see how history is recorded by the victor. And what I did was I put these names on my skin, printed the banners, and hung them up right next to the settlers monument, which you saw in the previous slide. And that kind of emerged, the whole thing about putting it up next to a monument sort of emerged because I was far more interested in the landscape to begin with. I wanted a remote landscape that spoke to the landscape as being a kind of a repository for something terrible that's happened on this site, like a battle. And only to discover that, there are these monuments. I had never been to Grahamstown prior to this project. In the Lost Men Mozambique, which was the next sort of slide, that's still Lost Men Grahamstown. This is the Lost Men Mozambique. I put this up in Maputo in 2007, and I researched the Frelimo Renamo Mozambican Civil War from, I think it goes from 1977 and ended in 92. So the South African government supported Renamo, and you could find plenty of South African names. But there was a moratorium placed on on the release of Mozambican names to the public in 2007. So I have unknown soldier, unknown soldier, unknown soldier, going all the way down my body. And I've got that repeated in English, in Shangaan, and Portuguese. And yeah, it was a very different sight, different kind of a way of reinvading the space in Mozambique, and a very public place. I think we'll talk about that a bit later. And then the following, the third installation I made, which was The Lost Men France, I put up in 2014. The centenary of World War I came along in 2014, and spent quite a lot of time researching the right site, and found this unbelievably huge memorial called Thiepval Memorial. And it's in the north of France, right on, almost on the border of Belgium. And it's the largest British World War I memorial in the world. And on the walls of this memorial are the names of all the white soldiers, white South African soldiers, who fought in the Delville Wood Battle, which is just about a 10-minute drive away. But no black South African names are represented here. There are the names of 72,000 men on the walls of this memorial, British and French names. No bodies, no remains were ever found. So they're just names. There's nothing else but. And I put my installation very close by. We were refused permission to put my sort of counter memorial up on the grounds. And we were also refused permission to put it up at Delville Wood. So I put it up on a farm road right next door. And I've included the names of everyone. So the names you see on my skin for this installation are Chinese names, Indian names, Black South African names, German Jewish names, and of course names from the Commonwealth. And those are literally the lost men. Here you can see somebody standing at the in the walls of inside the Thiepval Memorial, and that is a view of what the installation looked like in relationship to the monument in Thiepval, France. Thiepval, such a strange word. I mean, so many people don't even know it exists. Tiny little village in the north of France. And the village is also called Thiepval. And yeah, those are the lost men that I have included in my artwork. Some close-up views of the banners as they started out, with this extraordinarily beautiful pink kind of light that emerged after a very, very cloudy day, just as the sun was setting. That's what they looked like when they started, and they certainly don't look like that now while they're hanging at Wham.
It is a beautiful landscape, and I saw someone on Facebook just before the event started made a comment on one of the images advertising the webinar of your body with the imprints, embossed names on your skin, saying, oh, this gives me goosebumps. And there's quite a response to your process. And I think it might be worthwhile for us all to hear about the process that you go through for each installation to get the images that you put up in the installations and that are at WAM. And why have you used your body?
Okay, so I used my body because I felt that I could only speak about my own experience with any kind of authenticity. I think that after a lot of thought, I thought, in the really sort of early stages of the project, that I could perhaps take photographs of other men. And I decided against it because I don't think that I would be able to truthfully talk about somebody else's experience of this history and of these devastating battles that have taken place. I can talk about my own feelings of loss or the way that I feel about something. I don't think I can represent anybody else's for the moment. That might change for my next project. But what I did was I made these molds of my body. This is a mold of a plaster of Paris mold of me. And when you see it in the space, it looks so tiny. I mean, I am small, but it looks almost like a child. I couldn't even believe it myself when we made this mold. And if you look inside the mold, I've lined the interior of it with these three-dimensional letters. We had them 3D printed and lined the inside of this mold, and I would have reinserted myself into it and for about half an hour. And there is a little video that shows the sort of process of it later, but I think that's what the result is when I come out of the mold. And that is the photograph that Charles Fraser, the photographer I was working with, took of me when I came out of the mold. And sometimes they drew blood. The worst one was, I think the next slide, Julie. This one here, the scalp. I also shave all of my hair off my entire body and got into some really, really embarrassing situations because I shaved off my pubic hair as well and didn't do it quite properly. And coming out of that mold, I gave myself a Brazilian, which was absolutely excruciating. But for this particular image, the scalp has no muscle tissue underneath the skin, and it is definitely the most painful part of the body for me, actually pressing those names into the skin. And the top, there's a name right at the top of my scalp, and it says Emile, which is my father's name, actually. I found an Emile amongst the casualty lists, and that name drew some actual blood from the process. And in the video that comes next, Julie, there's another one. You can sort of see how it kind of goes. There's me in my studio, just individually placing each and every little letter in place. It's kind of painstaking. And also the letters have to be reversed because they're printed in reverse and they are lined inside the mold in reverse, so that when I come out, like any printmaking medium, it's the right way around. Learned that one the hard way after doing it wrong. And anyways, eventually got it right, and that's a view of them up. This is me going into the mold in the photographer's studio. And they put sandbags on top of me to really squash me in. And I had to lie there for half an hour, which I am a little claustrophobic, and I have I've had panic attacks in the past. So for half of these things, I was actually goofed out of my mind on tranquilizers, something that at least I could drive there and back. But after 10 minutes of that, I was freaking out. And half an hour is not good, especially the one with my whole body being in position. Lying like that for half an hour it was just dreadful. But drugs really are the way forward. Then I get up quickly, get into position, and which we'd all kind of planned beforehand. And you can see the letters pressed into the skin, and that is the result. And that is the image that got printed onto the silk. Some quick scenes of the extraordinary earthworks and that was done to put up the poles. And I worked with such fabulous people. No English, no speak English, all French. And my dreadful French trying to communicate everything was quite entertaining. sometimes. So I have, at the end result of that whole process is the installation of my sort of counter memorial, or I call them anti-monuments.
Yes, I've heard you use those terms before. I have to ask you, Paul, when you use the word anti-monument or counter-memorial, what do you mean?
There is a philosophy. I've never heard of the words counter memorial or anti-monument before. When I first started this project, it was not, I'm not that much of a genius. I only found out about those terms when I was in France, in Paris, on my residency, and some German curators took a look at my work and said, Paul, you actually are making, you're making a counter memorial, you're making an anti-monument. I just knew that I wanted to make a memorial, and I wanted to make a memorial out of everything that a traditional memorial is not. The materials that I used are temporary, they tear easily, they are impermanent. I wanted to speak to forgetting, actually. And there's a philosophy in art called counter or anti-monumentalism, which speaks to exactly all of those things. And I was astounded when I first heard those terms at how accurately they captured what I was trying to say. And a counter monument or an anti-monument or a counter memorial speaks to a traditional monument and subverts everything that monument represents. It denies the kind of narratives that the monument is engaging in with the public and what is in the public mind, in the public eye. And it does it right at the feet of that monument. And that is everything that I wanted to do. I think that the core reasons why I wanted to make an anti-monument are actually in response to my feelings about broken relationships with men. And that is the kernel of unconscious energy that's driven this entire project. And I think I've spent the last 16 years trying to uncover why that happened. And I think that it's important to do things like this with monuments to keep the conversation going, trying to figure out what they do represent, why, what is the relevance of having these monuments in public places today.
How do you think people have responded to your work? I mean, not only at the sites, but the exhibition was open for 2 weeks before lockdown, and I know you had some responses to your work in some of the tours that I was with you on. So I'd love to know what is the responses and positive and negative.
So in Grahamstown was a very, very art and gallery and museum going audience. It was the festival in Grahamstown, and people expected to see weird and wonderful things. You know, I suppose the people who knew my work before then had only seen tiny little etchings and lithographs that I'd scratched, and were quite shocked to see, you know, this series of washing lines with things flapping around in the wind. But that's an art gallery, sort of an art audience. Mozambique was something very different. Mozambique was in a very public place. It was on the jetty. Thousands of people traverse that jetty every day, and ordinary people going to work, coming back from work. People were bewildered. They were. Some people laughed. Some people didn't want to engage, just carried on walking and didn't want to even see naked male body flapping in the wind. some people did ask questions. We were giving out leaflets at the time in Portuguese and English. But the big thing that happened there was that we were actually censored. The police, I'd spent 2 years trying to get permission to put the installation up. And even so, the police that were there, they started criminal proceedings against us. I was there with my manager, Les Conn, and with photographer John Hotchkiss, the late John Hotchkiss. And they were actually going to start criminal proceedings against us. And Les managed to get them to, she actually convinced the policeman on the jetty to allow us to keep the whole thing up, bar 2 of the most explicit images. And the reasons given for the censorship was male nudity. And then, of course, there was France was quite something else. I think the worst sort of vituperous and vociferous kind of response I got was from a British guy who didn't give his real name, but he wrote this email to me, and I'm going to just read something to you. It says, "My views. I think this ridiculous piece of unexpurgated garbage is an insult to all those who fought, suffered, and died in this historic area." He goes on and on and on and says that it is, he doesn't really ask me any questions or anything like that. And he says, hopefully the weather or our French art lover friends will ensure that it does not stay here for very long. I do not condone vandalism in any shape or form, but I'm willing to make an exception in this case. And when I got that email, it was a bit shocking, and I got a big fright because I thought that when I gave walkabouts in the area, I was going to be accosted by a whole bunch of people, but that didn't happen. And I found this online resource called the Great War Forum that's got a record of all of the responses to the installation. And some were like that. Some people thought it was peculiar and funny. And some people were really, really complimentary, and they took it in a very positive way. But I think it's very important to realize that the site that it was put on, the ground of the Somme is a very sacred site, and it's a very sensitive site to a lot of people who are visiting those memorials and those monuments because of family members who've died and in those battles. And I knew that I was pushing those boundaries. And, you know, the kind of responses that you get are the responses. What you get is what happens. And that's what I enjoy about public art, I think. And I think that all responses are valid. I don't think that there's only one interpretation. In fact, that's just something I don't buy into at all. How you see a work is how you see a work. Yeah, those are the responses. At WHAM, very interesting responses, a bit more development on different responses that happened in Boston. You know, black names on white bodies. Why would you do that, Paul? What is the reason, and how do you feel about, don't you feel that you're taking advantage again by representing black identities on your white skin in this way? What are you adding that's new to the conversation about how white people have depicted black bodies in the past? What is the relevance? Why are you doing that? And the process of unpacking all of the issues around representing other ethnicities on myself have, of course, come to the uncomfortable realization and the fact that I cannot escape the racist lens through which I look at history, and I cannot hide from that. And I think that is a very important reason why I've also only used my own body. That is what I am. I cannot even, the way that I see the world has been colored by the way that I have been born into a system of privilege that has privileged me as a white person. I was born in 1969. I'm 51. I benefited from apartheid. There's no way I can get away from that. And I could not leave anybody out. I could not do what the traditional memorials have done and exclude certain individuals. On how would I justify that? And how would I couldn't. So that's what I've decided to keep on doing.
Yes, I see that. And for you, this has been an extraordinary 16-year project, responding to memorial sites around the world. And just considering the current context where memorials are being taken down because of what they represent. So my question is really, why should we care, Paul? Why should we even engage with memorials and monuments?
Well, I think we should care. We should care. Let me tell you why I think we should care. And this is, I think one of the nicest things about contemporary art is you get to talk to an artist, a living artist, as opposed to seeing this object that you just respond to. I think that it is incredibly relevant in a place like South Africa now, where the Rhodes Memorial has just been beheaded, and monuments and memorials are flashpoints of the public's emotional outbursts at continuing injustices that still happen in the world today. The George Floyd saga and the Black Lives Matter movement in the United States with all the Confederate statues. These symbols occupy such high profile spots in public spaces. Why? What is the relevance? Why are they given such prominence? And how does it feel? How does it feel for somebody who's been at the receiving end of a system of oppression for all of their lives? I think, as those are the reasons why we should care. And I think that it makes a lot of sense for people who have had to walk past those statues and experience that every day. Am I for the tearing down of monuments and memorials? It's very, very easy for me to say, no, please don't tear it, because it's a very important part of our history and you are destroying an incredibly important piece. And I would, if I had my own way, yes, I would like to engage with the monuments. I think if I was on some committee with government, I think that it would be wonderful to commission contemporary artists to make a new kind of counter statement that talks to the existing monument. What an amazing way that would be to employ an artist to do something like that. But I think with the Edward Coulston slave trader that was pulled down in Bristol recently, I think people have been trying to do that for ages, and the authorities have just turned them down. So I think, after you've been trying to do that for a long time, then maybe we need to tear the thing down. I think that those are the reasons why these things are incredibly important. Very also interesting development is the Hagia Sophia Museum in Turkey. Now it's been reconverted into a mosque. That hasn't happened just because somebody woke up in the morning and decided, oh, it's a cool thing to do. That has real political consequences for an entire country. And these places, these objects are powerful, powerful things. So that's why I think we should care. It's a way of readdressing history and re-looking at history too. I think those things are all important.
I think I agree with you. I think that engaging with these sites and challenging them, and artists have the wonderful power to do that, to make us think instead of walk past would be a much more powerful and poignant way of engaging with memorials than simply letting them stand and offend and oppress and hurt those that are offended by them. So I agree with you. Is this exhibition kind of a closing to the project then, as it's a retrospective, or is there, I guess what I'm asking is where to from here, Paul?
I think that I'm going to be doing one more counter memorial in the United States. That's my dream. And I think that for that leg of the project, I'd like to engage with a conflict that's actually happening now as we speak in the Middle East. My late father was Lebanese, so I feel that I can speak with some authenticity about representing a Lebanese soldier's body in addition to my own. And I also think that I could represent a white American soldier's body who is currently taking part in the conflict as as a living ongoing conflict that I personally in the flesh, so to speak, can respond to. While I'm alive, I can personally speak to and record the relationship between myself and these men, and I can talk. They can respond, they can refuse, they can fight, they can deny, they can agree or not agree. That kind of relationship is something that has where the power relationship is a lot more balanced. And that is what I'm planning to do in the near future. I also got this other project called Rising Falling, where I'm planning to project my Remember Dismember video onto the Louis Botha monuments at the Union Buildings in Pretoria. Yeah, that's what I'm hoping to do in the future.
No, thanks, Paul. This has been an amazing insight into the project that I don't think we would have actually got from simply coming to see the exhibition alone. So I really appreciate your time today. I think I can see a flood of questions coming in.
I can also
and I think we need to give our guests a chance, and I will, on behalf of everybody, read them to you. I hope you don't mind. So as well as anyone has questions from the Facebook Live, we can see them and we'll send them on through if you do have. So let's start with Daleen Gannis says, "Hi, I love your work. The process seems incredibly painful. I'm curious and want to ask if the pain of this process symbolizes the pain of the embodiment of masculinity."
Oh, the embodiment of masculinity. Well, it's interesting. I think that as long as masculinity is defined by violence, I think is a kind of a toxic way of looking at what it means to be a man. I think that is one of the reasons why I chose to use a process that is very painful, because my kind of experience of pain and loss from broken relationships with men is the really, really personal sort of starting point for wanting to make this project. And memory and loss are crucial to the way I've actually kind of engaged with having to deal with that. Very simple. It's a very, very simple starting point for wanting to embark on a project that's taken the last 16 years. I think that as long as masculinity is defined by violence, vulnerability, and a violent masculinity, will always be at odds with each other. So the act of making yourself vulnerable as a man is not something that certainly men from my generation have ever been led to believe is in any way empowering whatsoever. So that is, I would say, one of the reasons why I chose to do this very painful process. It's about making myself vulnerable, I think.
Okay, next question from Jenny Stretton. It asks you, is your use of silk in the context of shrouds?
Oh, yes. A lot of people have seen that and made that kind of association, and it's a very beautiful reading of the work. I don't think it was conscious on. Was it or was it not? You know, Professor Pamela Lara wrote a very beautiful essay, and she actually called it "Shrouds on the Somme." It was her response. So you're not alone in seeing the shroud as a symbol. And I suppose they are shroud, banner, flag. Some people have even seen a prayer, like Tibetan prayer flags. Those kinds of things. I really enjoyed the fragility of silk. It tears easily. It's a very fragile and delicate material. It's also a precious material. And I liked the sort of association between memory as something precious that we want to hold on to. Those are the sort of associations with the material that I wanted to engage in. So definitely shroud is right up there.
And Sally Gore is asking if there's any rationale to the typeface that you use on your body.
Yes, I've used a Times Roman or a Palatino typeface. They are serifed fonts, and most of the memorials and monuments that I've visited, the traditional, have used these kinds of typefaces, because I believe that monuments and memorials use a specific architectural language that talks about authority, very authoritative, maybe authoritarian is a bit too strong, an authoritative way of expounding the seriousness of what has happened on these sites. And I thought that using that typeface would talk the same kind of language, but I would be subverting that language because I'm using it on my body, which is something that doesn't last, that is soft, smooth skin. And I kind of liked the idea of that juxtaposition, really.
So Louis asks a question that I'm getting a very similar question from quite a few people asking. He first says he finds the concept of your work very interesting and your work is very visually striking. He asks, do you feel there's some connection between the concept of anti-monuments as it is explored in your work and the discussions we're having all around about monuments and historical figures all around the world, particularly in the States of the movement of Black Lives Matter?
Absolutely. I absolutely do. I think that, you know, the Black Lives Matter movement and the tearing down of the Edward Colston statue in Bristol, the Hagia Sophia sort of, you know, it was a museum and now it's become a mosque again. All of these things are incredibly important events, and they you know, these monuments can kind of die in a way in public places unless they are engaged with in some way. They become mute. They certainly, you know, not to everybody, but it all depends. I suppose it all depends on what's happening at the time. And if they're not engaged with, they kind of the conversation sort of dies along with them. And I think that that's one of the reasons why I'm mostly for engaging with them on a continual way rather than tearing them down, because there would be a visual representation of the debate happening in a public space that will continue to go on and on and on, and so that we don't forget about what actually happened. But they've got to be engaged with in some sort of way. And I mean, that's one of the reasons why I think these things are incredibly important, really.
Cyril, Sushan is asking a very interesting question. If a memorial is a celebration of a viewpoint at a point in time, it seems to me that a counter memorial presents the point of view of the victims of that initial moment. This is then a balancing of opposite poles, a bringing together of the contradiction of a victor and the defeated. Do you have any ideas of what the time frame is to bring that opposite out and how to enable it? I guess maybe how to engage with that balance between the two opposing fighting sides.
Right. Sure. No, I don't. I can say that just from the experience of what I've done, say for instance, with the commemoration services that have happened, say in France now, that's 100 years. 100 years it's taken. Yeah, and 100 years is not actually a long time, I don't think. My dad was 93 when he died. And there are new monuments and memorials being constructed that have put up in, say, on the Somme in northern France, that include permanent memorials that include the names of everybody who died in those battles. That's 100 years? Maybe it is. I'll give you another interesting thing that I noticed. At the commemoration services at Thiepval in France, there were a few German, well, they weren't soldiers. They looked like they were dressed in police uniforms. Young people. They were young people. So just imagine, you're at this monument, you're at a service that is commemorating the death of people and the opening of the Battle of the Somme, right? Where Germany was the enemy. Now you've got 100 years later, and I can't remember the year that German people were coming back onto the battlefields, being part of these ceremonies, amongst a whole lot of people who must have felt very ambivalent about having German people around. Or how must it feel for a German person to be commemorating with the enemy? Very, very sensitive, hard questions get asked of people in these places. That's after 100 years. It might have started happening, I think, the people who I stayed with on the Somme, Julie and David Thompson at the B&B, are very knowledgeable about the people coming over from Germany to do pilgrimages to the German grave sites. And I think there were many, many years when nobody came at all. These are hard questions that I think we're just unfolding as we go along. There's no real answer to that, I don't think. It's part of just, it is what it is.
It's all about the discussion that these kinds of installations bring out, and
absolutely,
and thinking about these things is important. I think we got to end with one more question from Bronwyn Miles. I think it's a good one to end on. What advice do you have for high school art students or teachers, many of whom are grappling with these kinds of issues in our current socio-political climate? And often these conversations or artworks are censored in various degrees in school environments, physically and conceptually, for a fear of opposing a norm. How do you challenge the norms that schools are so deeply built upon, and often in the forms of memorials and sculptural works?
Well, I
Good
must
question.
say, yeah, it is deeply disturbing to me that these works are being censored. I don't know. I think that is a very disturbing comment. I never did art at school. It wasn't something that was offered to me. I went to an all-boys Catholic school. Just wasn't an option. And I think that for a school to be censoring, it's an art context. The Constitution of South Africa, as far as I understand it, guarantees the freedom of expression of any artist in any art context. Art is not to be censored. And I would challenge, that is a very tough question. And it's very, very disturbing to me that young people are being censored. And certainly, I think that the discussion around important topics like this is especially for young people, young men who are grappling with issues around what it means to be a man, where bullying at school is such an incredibly difficult topic to deal with, where masculinity is around raping young women is seen as something to be aspired to, as opposed to respecting women, respecting all of those really toxic ideas around what it means to be a young person. And now we are censoring artworks that kind of challenge the sort of mainstream views of things. Very disturbing for me. I don't have an answer to that. I really don't. I think that's a very tough thing to do. And I think that educators need to be brave. I think educators need to be brave and support artists who want to do things like that.
On that note, on that thought-provoking note, some food for thought, and I think we need to end here. I wish we had more time, but we really got to our hour is up. Thank you, Paul, for coming and joining and giving so much of yourself today. And thank you to our guests for joining us and supporting us. And I see there was up to 120 people watching on the Zoom side, and I'm sure there were more on the Facebook. And thank you so much for the support. The show is up. The museum is not open yet, but we will be open as soon as we feel it's safe to do so. And when we do, we hope you come and visit the show and actually see the artwork in the flesh, because there's nothing like it. And that's what's so wonderful about museum exhibitions. And in the meantime, though, if you want to delve more deeply into these conversations, and perhaps, Bronwyn, and a suggestion for your classes or your school is to look at the book that Fitz Art Museum has published alongside this exhibition and is actually in fact for sale. Julie will put up a poster so you can get some details, but just to make things smoothly, you can actually purchase it straight from Paul. Thanks, Paul, for helping us out with this. If you email him on his email, studio@paulemmanuel.net, it's 350 Rand, which is a really good price for this book, which has been subsidized. Obviously packaging and shipping on top of that, but I recommend you have a look at it because it gives some more context to the project overall and some really relevant conversation around art and the role of art in society, I think. So I have to say thank you, Paul. I have to say thank you, Julie, and the WAM team, and a very good evening to you all.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Have a good night. Bye.